Okay, well, I'm really eager to get to our main topic today. It was fun getting to know you a little bit better. And listener, Mark and I do know each other in real life, which is a real blessing and a thing of beauty. We are doing let's talk about mental health. And so we're going to talk about this, mental health and see where we go. Is there a time that you can share with us where either you struggled with your mental health or someone you loved struggled with their mental health?
Uh, I I thought about this, Rochelle, and I would say probably the place I've struggled with it most recently is is just overcoming hurtful behavior from a family member.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And for me, I ended up going to a 3-day religious retreat, and by the end of it, I realized the reason why, not to get all religious, but I think the reason why I ended up there was that God just wanted to help me be able to figure out how to forgive this family member for the way they treated me. And as we went through the conversation, I realized, and this was a point that was made to me, it was like I was able to forgive them for the way they treated me, but I couldn't forget it. I
Mm.
could not forget it. And what somebody said to me, which really helped me, kind of what I learned from it, is don't worry about trying to forget it. Just forgive and accept versus
Uh,
forgive and forget,
Okay.
which helped so much.
Right. Okay. So focusing on the forgiveness, that's sort of like one step, and then
Yep,
realizing that we really can't forget it, and then not to worry about, but accepting it instead.
exactly.
Okay. Did you notice that your behavior towards this individual changed after the 3-day retreat and after you came to this realization?
Yeah, I think so. In just the way that I think the bottom line is, you just have to accept them for who they are, and just realize that people, they aren't necessarily going to change. So just
Yes.
accept them for who they are, and don't think I'm
Yes.
going to change them by either, you know, not talking to them, ghosting them, or whatever it might be. Just realize, you know what? They have strengths too, and maybe we just focus on the positives and not worry so much about those negatives.
Now, were you able even to take that and to have like a conversation, or was it just more in the way you continue to approach this person? I mean, did you want to or felt you need to like say, hey, I've come to this place and forgiveness is there on both sides, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think for us, I know there's always different family dynamics, but I think for our particular family, it's usually just water under the bridge and we move on. I
Okay.
didn't necessarily go back and talk about that particular incident.
Right.
It
Okay.
did come up eventually, and
Ah.
that person definitely, apologized, said, "You know what? I never should have said the things I said. I'm so sorry. I never should have said them." You know,
Ah.
and but I'm glad I brought it up because really the good of it all was that it allowed me to sleep. It got rid of the pains in my chest, that I was having over this whole thing because it just tore me apart. So that was really the good of it is I get to sleep again. So
Right. Okay. So you had really, it was even in your body. I mean, you had really, through your mind and your heart, it manifested itself in these physical symptoms.
no doubt. Yeah. Like
Wow.
when I've talked to people about it, I've never been to Al-Anon before, but when I've talked to people about the situation, even like when we were at the retreat, some of the people at the retreat said, Mark, you might want to check out Al-Anon at some point.
Hmm.
And I still haven't, just because we've kind of worked through it. So, but I still
Right.
think that might be something that would be good for me to check out at some point or another, because it's good this week, but who knows where it might go next week.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, that's a good point. So you got through it through time, and then this 3-day retreat really gave you the place and the space to sort of get to the next step of the healing of it all. And that's what you learned. And then good even came from it down the road when you were able later to have this conversation And the person apologized and said, I shouldn't have said those things. So do you feel a sense of closure and a sense of peace now?
For now, yeah. Because it's good for this week, and I think maybe that's part of the AA philosophy, which I've never been to AA either, but I always hear it's about one day at a time. And that's kind of I think that's kind of the way I look at it. Maybe it's 1 week at a time or 1 month at a time or whatever. But I just find, as I said, I can forgive, but I can't forget. What I find is I still kind of keep that guard up just because, you know what I mean? So it's like I accept it, but yet I can still feel I keep the guard up there, and I don't necessarily, in conversations, I won't necessarily go to places that I know might set them off. It's just like, you know what? They don't they have to earn the right for me to go there again. And in the meantime, I won't go there again. If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. I think we find too, particularly with family members who maybe we have differing opinions on certain topics that I probably shouldn't really engage. In fact, Ron and I were just having this conversation. What do you say when, someone you love and care about, a family member, is like going off in an area where you're like, well, I just don't see it that way. I mean, do you
Mm.
like get sucked into that whole thing and say, are you kidding me? Da 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 da. Right? Or what do you do?
I kind of go back to the whole philosophy of religion and politics, where I'm totally tolerant of everybody's opinions. They can have whatever opinions they want, and I know I'm not going to change them. And I think at this point, maybe I would have done that years ago, but now I kind of feel like, especially when you don't get to talk to somebody that often, to spend time on that kind of stuff, to me, it's not worth it. Because I'm not going to change their opinions, and I would just as soon talk to them about how they're doing, how their family's doing, what their kids are doing, and just talk about more positive things, and not
Yes.
necessarily dwell on things that aren't going to change, that just cause contention like that.
Yes, because you're right. You're so right. You are not going to change their mind, and they're not going to change your mind. I mean, not in a just in a way of I find sometimes when people kind of go off on the tangents that there's just a little bit of, for lack of a better word, arrogance there, or
Hmm.
like, but I know. Well, how come you don't know this thing that I know?
Hmm.
And it's like,
Yeah.
whoa, wait a minute. Can't we
Yeah.
agree to see it a little bit differently?
Yep. Yeah. And I think what I find with my really good friends, in some cases, they have completely different political views than I do. And we'll just say when we go to surf, it's like, hey, once we're on the water's edge, we don't talk about politics anymore. And we would still try. One other guy's an Irish heritage, just like I am. We both kind of have those Irish tempers. And we just realized, you know what? It escalates so quickly. We just realized a long time ago that our friendship means so much more to us than anything about politics. That it's just like he and I, we don't talk about politics, whether we're on the water's edge or whether we're having coffee after a surf session. We just don't talk about it, period,
You just don't go
because
there.
it's just not worth it. Yeah.
Not worth it, right? Is there any other? So politics is in that category. Would you say religion is also in that category too?
No, not as much, because I think religion is, I think, more personal to people. I don't think they share their religious beliefs as much as they do their political beliefs.
Okay.
And in some ways, I almost feel like political, sometimes that's kind of almost become a religion. So it's just like, yeah, either way, I don't, I don't know. I think the Dalai Lama said it best when it came to religion, when somebody asked him in his book, The Art of Happiness. Did you ever read that book, Rechelle?
Yes, my mom gave it to me. Yes.
Yeah.
The one
So
with Bishop Desmond Tutu also, right? Yes.
yeah, so this one was done with Howard Cutler, the psychologist that basically interviewed the Dalai Lama over
Mhm.
years and years. And the thing he asked the Dalai Lama is, well, why is Buddhism the best religion? And the Dalai Lama's answer was just like, well, I never said Buddhism was the best religion. He said, think about all the people you know and all the different personalities they have. why can't there be more than one religion? Like that one religion might be best for that person, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's best for another person. And that's kind of the way I feel about religion. It's like, you know what? You go what makes you feel the most comfortable or whatever. I'm not going to tell people Catholicism is the best religion at all. Even though I was raised a Catholic, I kind of pull things from different religions, even from the Buddhist religion. I love a lot of the things that they talk about. So I think I've kind of created my own religion in a way. So still all based on God and Jesus Christ, I guess. So
Right.
not
Yeah,
necessarily the Buddha or whatever, but either
right.
way, that's why I think, yeah, religion and politics can go wherever they want.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's an interesting distinction. One's a little more personal and private, not necessarily private, but more personal. And then
Hmm.
politics is, it's a little more out there in the arena.
Hmm.
What what advice would you have for somebody experiencing a mental health crisis?
I think it kind of ties back. I mean, even the way I ended up talking with you about any of this was because of the Fallen Waterman's Foundation, Rochelle.
Yes. Yes.
So, and I think too, just to preface for the listeners too, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychiatrist or anything like that. But the Fallen Waterman's Foundation, we started including counseling in our mission just because we realized that just giving out scholarships to the children of fallen watermen and women, it wasn't enough because a lot of these kids weren't ready to deal with going to college. They had to deal with their grief first. And that's where I started talking with some of my friends that are family therapists or psychotherapists or clinical psychologists. And once somebody needs help, we put them in touch with the experts. I'll put them in touch with the experts that can truly help them work through their grief or work through whatever they're having issues with.
Right.
So for me, um, I guess first it's almost cliche to say, but I think you can pray for guidance. I think it's one of the first things you can do. And then secondly is to seek help.
Right.
Just seek help from, and it might start with just your friends. And I think
Right.
we might have talked about this before, but especially with men, not to focus on men, but I think I understand men better than I do women. But
Yes.
it's such an example where we had two guys from Fort Point, two locals from Fort Point take their own lives during the pandemic, and none of us had any idea
No.
that they were struggling at all. And especially with men, we'll talk about our bad necks or our bad shoulders, but we won't talk about what's going on upstairs because we feel like it shows weakness.
Mm.
It's, oh yeah, yeah, whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Right.
people think, oh,
Yes.
you're showing
Yes.
weakness. So we kind of evolved the mission of the Fallen Waterman's Foundation to actually offer guidance and counseling to people that haven't done something to, or that haven't had something bad happen to them, to try to
Right.
almost be proactive in getting them help. So I think that's the piece too. And the other thing I talk so much about is just, especially with men, is just being observant of your friends. Fort Point's a perfect example, or the local surf spot. Same guys show up all the time, but
Right.
then you might see somebody not show up anymore. And that's usually the first sign that something's going on. And why aren't they showing up? What are they dealing with? And maybe that's the time you make the call just to check in on them, see how they're doing.
Yeah. Exactly.
And sometimes, I mean, I literally just had a conversation with one of my best buddies yesterday. We talked for 2 hours, and we
Oh,
were probably an hour and 45 minutes into it before anything came up about how much he was struggling with one thing or another. And then it came out that he was struggling with all this stuff, but it took an hour and 45 minutes. And I've known him since we were 11 years old.
oh
And it
my.
took me that long to figure out something was wrong because he wasn't going to talk about it out up front, you know? So
Oh,
anyway, I think that's my best advice on that front. Just coming from the layman once again, not from
right.
being a therapist or whatever,
Of
but just
course.
I think
Yes.
listening and being observant to
Right.
what's going on in the community around you and those close friends. I think that's such a huge piece.
That is a really huge piece. In fact, we just had a guest really recently who talked about check in on your people and that same
Hmm.
sort of thing. If something just seems a little off, just what's going on? You doing okay?
Yeah.
want to talk. I mean, whatever it is, it's a very simple thing and it's very doable. And there really isn't any reason not to do it. And like you said, if you notice, oh my gosh, so-and-so hasn't been here in so long, what's going on with them? It
Yeah.
just doesn't take that long just to check in.
And then I think the other piece too is just to make sure they know. It's like in the surfing world, we'll even all, our surf crew will talk about, oh yeah, we're going to meet tomorrow morning or whatever. But then on Surfline, you can see how big the surf is going to be. And as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, some guys obviously they get really busy with work, or they don't feel that good. They're cold, they have a cold or whatever. Instead of just saying, you know what, it's too big. I'm not going out and surf that size. And the point I'll make is that nobody thinks less of you because you don't want to go out and huge surf. It's like everybody knows their limits. That's fine. It's like we respect that you know your limit, that you don't push into an area that you're not comfortable with. And it's
Right.
the same thing. It's just once again letting somebody know when they do maybe open up that, hey, I don't think any less of you because you've brought this up that you're struggling.
Mhm.
It's like that's not where we're going. It's like, so I think
Right.
that's the other piece too, especially once again, dealing with men in these situations.
No, I think that is a very key, important point. I don't think any less of you because fill in the blank, whatever it is. And I think
Exactly.
that what that shows is that you are showing them that you are a safe person, no matter
Hmm.
what comes after the because, or no matter what they share. And that is important that everybody has a safe person, somebody they really
Hmm.
can reveal themselves to. And I love all your points about men because you're right. It is going to be different for a man than it is for a woman.
100%. It's
Yeah.
like, my wife, my sister-in-laws. It's amazing how many words they can use in 1 minute. Whereas a lot of time as the brother-in-laws get together, we've used up our quota within 1 minute. And there's nothing else to talk about except to watch the football game or whatever.
Right. That
But
is
there
so
is something to
funny.
be said. I just think women have a tendency more to talk with each other about that, about their problems than men do.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily part of our DNA, I think, because it comes back to feeling like, oh, you're weak because you're talking about this. Whereas you can talk about your bad knee because you wore it out or whatever. So it's definitely something to be said
And
for all that.
I think we need to get the message out that it actually shows that you're stronger to be able to reveal a vulnerability. It takes
Mhm.
strength, it takes bravery, it takes courage.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's true. And it
Now,
was fun.
go
Like I
ahead.
go back to that religious retreat that we did, Rechelle.
Uh-huh.
It was men only. And it was
Oh,
so different to be in a group of men just talking about different things because I think they were, in a way, almost more willing to open up than if there had been women in the group too. I don't think you would have had the same conversations that
mm.
we got to have just specifically as, a group of men.
Well, whoever organized that really knew what they were doing because women
Yeah.
are very conversational by and large, and we
Yes.
do like to talk and we do like to share, and we do, I mean, all those things that make us who we are, and we
Yeah.
probably would have monopolized a lot of that time.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
good for it to be men only so that you guys really had the chance.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Although in some ways, I would almost like to go to one with my wife, just because then she could have experienced all the things that I experienced as well, just so we would have come out of it on the same page, just kind of knowing what we had been through.
Right. Well,
But
I'm sure they offer them for couples.
yeah, I think they do. I know my brother and his wife went to one a long, long time ago. So it's
Yeah.
Curcio. It's put on, I think, by the Catholic Church and the Episcopalian Church.
Oh,
But
okay.
the thing that drew me to it was that it wasn't just for like a specific denomination. It was just all
Okay.
Christian, any Christian denomination could come. The only requirement was that you'd been baptized. So
Okay.
to me, that was the most compelling thing is I didn't necessarily have to go hear everything based on the Catholic Church because
Right.
that's what I grew up in. So it was that to me, it made it more of a kind of a broad view of it or whatever.
Hmm. Yeah. Well,
So
that sounds like it. I love everything you got out of that, and you're still getting out of that. Those are good
yeah,
moments.
yeah, I think so.
how do you think we can reduce some of the stigma that goes with mental health? And like you're talking about the moments when we're afraid that we might appear weak because we're revealing something about ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I always fall back on, Rochelle, is communication. Maybe just because that's where I feel most comfortable. Like if you told me I had to figure out some Excel spreadsheet tied to math, I probably wouldn't think that would be the answer. But to me, so much of it is just based on communication. And I think in a way, you look at the generations. And I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. The silent generation, the group of people that came out of World War II, and how those men wouldn't talk about anything that happened during their days in war.
Right,
And you just look at how much that has progressed, where I think it has gotten, I don't think the stigma is there like it used to be. I
right.
think we're making progress. It seems like we're making progress for sure.
I
And
agree.
maybe that's in certain areas we might be making it where maybe it's just discussed a little bit more. Like I would think, not to make generalizations, but the conversations that I might have with somebody here in Northern California might be very different than the conversations I'd have with somebody in Butte, Montana,
Mm.
you
Mm.
know?
That's
And not
interesting,
that there's
sort
a
of a
different,
geographical or cultural tie there.
yeah, I think so in some ways. So I think communication is probably the key. Just to
Right.
keep doing what we're doing and just talking about it. And yeah, I
I
think that's
agree.
probably where I'd go.
Starts with talking and it starts small, like you're saying, just with just that one-on-one with the person who might be struggling and then they open up and then that is, yeah, I don't think any less of you because and we
Yeah,
just keep having those conversations one-on-one and then hopefully it keeps growing out and then we
yeah.
can, and I agree with you. We have reduced it and I think we need to reduce it more.
I think the one thing on the men's side though too, Rochelle, some of the guys that have the most trouble talking about it are the ones that will have a conversation and they'll ask me question after question about how's my wife doing? How are my kids doing? And after an entire conversation, I realized, wait a minute, I never even asked them how their kids are doing or how they're doing, because they'll dominate the questions and just like everything will be, everybody loves to talk about themselves. So it's like, oh, I'm telling them about what's going on here and there. And then at the end, and that's what happened in this conversation the other day, after an hour and 45 minutes, I finally was thinking, wait a minute, I haven't even found out how his kids are doing. So then I asked him how his kids are doing. And then I find out all this stuff has gone down
Oh.
that has put him in a position where he's really stressed out right now and he's really struggling with things, even
Mm.
though you never would have known it in the first hour and 45 minutes of the conversation,
Right. Right.
And so in some ways, I think men put up that as a guard so they don't have to talk about themselves. They'll just keep asking you questions about yourself.
Okay. I think there's really something to that. That makes a lot of sense. I'm so glad you hung in there with that friend to get to the 1 hour and 45-minute mark to be able to have him confide in you and share with you
Yes.
his struggle.
Yes, absolutely. Maybe we need an unabashed you that's based on men.
Oh, I like
Oh,
that. I like that. Well,
what
actually,
do
we
you
are
think?
going to do
Yep.
a series on men coming up here in a little bit, more towards the summer. Yeah,
Is that right?
I'm
Oh,
excited
that
about it.
that'll be I'll look forward to listening to that one.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Is there anything else that you want to say in conclusion as we wrap this up?
No, I love what you're doing, Rochelle. You're doing a great job, and it's so fun. I'm so honored to have you even ask me come back a second time. That's like I guess I must have done all right on the first time around. So no, it's
Well,
I'm honored to be part of it, and just congratulations on so much success too.
well, thank you. And I just feel like conversations, one conversation at a time is it's really an honor to be able to carve out just a half an hour, 45 minutes, like you were talking about with your friend, to just have a
Mhm.
one-on-one conversation about fun things, but then also, important, more serious things, and to get somebody else's thoughts and ways to approach. I just, it's a sweet spot for me. I absolutely love
Love
it.
it.
Okay, Mark,
Good.
I Fallen Waterman's Foundation, where can people find that?
Yeah. So it's fallenwatermansfoundation.org. and Watermans is spelled MANS, which I know grammatically that's not correct, but it's Fallen Waterman's Foundation.
Okay, so singular on the man,
Mhm.
right? But
And then
singular,
just S, no
yes.
apostrophe or anything like that,
Okay,
just
and
Fallen
because
Waterman's Foundation
right, and
dot org.
I don't think that that's necessarily incorrect grammatically because,
Mm.
if we were making a website, we don't have apostrophes and punctuation other than the period in a
Mhm.
website. So,
Yeah,
and you're talking
yeah,
about one person fallen at a time. You're not talking about, a whole slew of more than one man. So I'm just throwing that
yeah.
in there. I think it's great.
Well, and the whole point with it though too, and you know this, it's not just for men either. It's
Right.
watermen and women. There's just not really a term that identifies both those at the same time as water person or whatever, but I think anybody in our community, and it's not just about surfers, it's about divers and stand-up paddlers and foilers and kiters. It's pretty much anybody that's, made the ocean part of their lives. That's the piece of it. And I think the other piece too is just it's not just open to people that have had something tragic happen in their families in the water. It could also be somebody that ended up with brain cancer or gotten a bad accident or whatever and have left their kids behind or their spouse behind. Because a
Mhm.
lot of the counseling ends up helping the spouse too that's left behind, not just the kids. Initially, it was all about the kids, but then I realized a lot of times the spouse needs a little help too. So,
Absolutely. And then
yeah,
how long
so
has it been in existence, the foundation?
so we got our 501(c)(3) status back in 2010. And it's just kind of evolved from just doing scholarships. We've given out $180,000 in scholarships now over the years. And it's
Wow.
for just continuing education, whether it's a 4-year bachelor's degree, extended into masters or PhDs, but it can also be for
Wow.
vocational school too. We ended up just helping a guy from San Diego actually that broke his neck diving into the water at Mission Bay, and
Oh,
he'd been a
no.
competitive surfer at San Diego State.
Oh, no.
And he's basically in a wheelchair now. So we're actually helping him with his medical bills and
Wow.
his physical therapy. And he's doing great. He's coming back, but it's going to be a
Good.
long road. His name
Yeah.
was Colin Boss or Bossy, Bosse. And
BOS.
there was a fundraiser or like a GoFundMe for him in the San Diego area.
Oh, I
And
heard
somehow
about
we found out
that.
about it, and so we've helped him out as well.
Oh, good for you. Oh, and you found out about it and you reached out to them. So
Yes.
you don't even I mean, yes, people can reach out to you, but if you hear about something, you reach out to them. And that is really a picture of beauty right there because you're not,
I'd say
yeah.
probably 80% of the people we've helped, we found out about them. They didn't know about us. Because it's like
Uh,
we don't have that great of a following. So usually we find out about them through people in the community, or there'll be an article in the newspaper about we had another guy die at Ocean Beach, December of 2023. And
mm,
none of us really knew him that well, even though he'd been around. None of us really knew him by name. But same thing. So we found out about him based on the article that came out on Surfline or SF Gate or wherever it might have been. So yeah, most of the time it's just we find out about different instances and then we approach the family and offer the counseling. And in some cases, it might take them a year or two before they ever get to the point where they feel like they're ready for counseling, or
mhm.
they just want to even pursue it at all in that way, just
Right.
because they're dealing with so much other stuff at the time. So
You're there, your
yeah,
foundation is there. So when they're
yeah,
ready, and then if you reach out, when they're ready, you're there. And
exactly.
I think that's just absolutely incredible, Mark. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for doing
Yeah.
that because I think it matters. All those
Mhm.
positive things we can do to be of service, to serve others I think it's one of the best parts of life.
Yep, for sure. 100%.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate you saying yes and having this wonderful conversation with you.
All right, Rochelle. Great to see you. See you next month.